the commissioner of the LPGA, Liz Moore. And also, as we talk about executive leadership in sports leagues, Amanda Vandervort is president of the USL Super League. Give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So let's start by talking about golf. We're all here for golf. We're also talking about the broader women's sports boom. We will get to soccer. But Liz, it's been a few months since you've been named
feels
commissioner.
like minutes.
January, right?
January, yes.
Okay. So January, February, March, April, May, like 4 or 5 months. How's it going?
It's gone by in the blink of an eye to begin with. But it's going really well. I have obviously was honored to be asked by the board to step in during a transitional period. And the first thing I did was kind of set out on a listening tour and talk to all of our stakeholders and constituencies. And the passion behind the game today has never been stronger. The support for the tour and for our players has never been stronger. So it's been overwhelming and just had an incredible amount of support from all of those groups.
This event, this starts today, the Mizuho America's Open, is a newer tournament. Year 3 here. How do you guys, and you've been at the LPGA a while prior to just being commissioner, I mean, how do you guys approach a newer event and tournament and sort of marketing and promoting that, making sure that that gets the eyeballs, the buzz, versus obviously a number of tournaments that have been mainstays?
Yeah, great question. And I would say that the response to that would vary based on the tournament, where it is, what the purpose of the tournament is. We have a variety. I don't know how many people appreciate how golf is structured, but I think when Cheryl was up here, she was referencing XL, who operates this tournament. You've got title sponsors. So we love partners like Cheryl and Mizuho because they are deeply engaged and involved in the tournament to support it. So a lot of what was talked about earlier with a lot of the marketing that Mizuho took its organizational marketing and rolled it into the tournament really elevates this type of event. And so it really depends on what the title sponsor and what the owner's purpose is in the event. We have some that are kind of community givebacks, and it's really all about the local community and who they want to touch. And some of them, you talked earlier about the business of golf. A lot of our events are really about engaging with clients, hosting and supporting clients as much as the community. So that can be marketed in a different way because it's a different audience that they're really trying to target.
In a way, Liz and Amanda, it's sort of counterintuitive, but this is actually a perfect pairing because, you know, you talk about something like the LPGA that's been around however many decades and that is very...
75 years.
There you go. Congratulations. Happy birthday.
Thank you. It's our anniversary.
Happy anniversary. Everyone knows the LPGA and you know, the leading name in women's golf. And then you have the USL Super League, which is brand new. We're in the first season right now, wrapping the regular season soon, and the playoffs are starting. Amanda, I have a feeling maybe not every single person in this room knows about the USL Super League yet. You know, European schedule inspired, some unique things about the structure. Just tell everyone the quick 101 on USL.
Yeah, thank you. The USL Super League, we launched in August of 2024, and our season runs August to June, actually. So like you said, we're at the very tail end of our inaugural season, which has been fantastic. Our playoffs begin June 7th with our final June 14th with the highest seed hosting. So we have 8 teams right now across the country. Brooklyn, actually we have a team in Washington, D.C., Charlotte, North Carolina, Tampa, Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Dallas, Lexington, Kentucky, Spokane, Washington. Did I get 8? Usually I count them on my fingers.
That was good, right off the top of your head. Yeah.
But we have 8 teams. We'll have 9 next year. We're expanding to Jacksonville, Florida, and we actually just released our 25-26 season this week. So our schedule for next week, announced our schedule for next year this week. So yeah, we're flying. It's been a great success, and we're incredibly proud to have women's professional soccer now in more communities across the United States.
What's unique about the USL Super League and the structure? I alluded to there's sort of a European influence there, obviously, with the schedule and with the 2 big breaks. There's no draft, no salary cap.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing forward the inspiration. Really, we are part of the global soccer community. Being on the international calendar, like I said, means August to June. The other soccer leagues in the United States run March to October or November. So a little bit of a different calendar, which means our opening and our final are both in the most, they're in great months of the year where hopefully the weather's great. Fans are excited to come out to games during kind of those pivotal moments of our season. We also operate a youth to pro player pathway. So for us, development of the youth, amateur space, like pairing and complementing the collegiate space, all underpins the professional league at the very top. Of course, there are 2 professional leagues in the United States. We think there's room for more and more growth of women's sports broadly and women's soccer, and we've seen incredible success with the USL Super League. In fact, next year, we will be the Gamebridge Super League, as we've just brought Gamebridge on as our title partner. So as we're talking about the growth of women's sports, the investment of sponsors into the game, and the impact that we believe somebody like Gamebridge will make on the Super League, we're incredibly proud and excited.
Yeah, you're scooping one of my later questions. I wanted to ask about that. We covered that news, Gamebridge becoming the title sponsor. I mean, it's let's not take it lightly here. I mean, it's not just, sponsoring a tournament. This is changing the official name of the whole league to the Gamebridge Super League. I mean, you don't often see that. Talk about a little bit the sort of considerations that go into that, any sort of potential pitfalls, and also to bring on a sponsorship that big when, as you said, we're in the first season of existence.
I think it's such a demonstration of the growth of women's sports and the investment opportunity today for brands and partners to get involved in women's sports. So for us, bringing Gamebridge Super League, I mean, of course, the financial benefits of us to be able to reinvest into the league, into the players, into the communities in which the Super League exists is pivotal, but also partnering with somebody like Gamebridge who has properties across sports, from their ambassadors of Caitlin Clark, Annika Sorenstam, to now Brianna Scurry on the soccer side, Billie Jean King in tennis. Those are some of their ambassadors. They have the Gamebridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, where you see the WNBA All-Star Game. So and NASCAR races and F1. I mean, Gamebridge is across so many different sports and properties. 40% of their marketing and sponsorship investment goes into women's sports. So they've demonstrated that their commitment to women's sports is significant, and they've unlocked and opened doors to us that we're excited to partner across all these different properties.
Golf as well, our penultimate tournament.
Absolutely, yeah, the Annika,
That's right.
powered, driven by Gamebridge.
That's right.
Yeah, Liz, can we talk a little bit about the same in golf? I mean, Michelle West and I, when we opened the day, we're talking about kind of the growth that we've seen in women's golf for years now. And now there's been sort of an accelerant. There's been kind of fuel added to the fire, and that is just this boom in the last 2 or 3 years, I think fair to say, in eyeballs, investment, buzz, media coverage, business interest in women's sports writ large. So, you are the chief legal officer and CTO at the LPGA before being named interim commissioner. You've been there a while. Have you seen sort of a shift or maybe a hockey sticking in that kind of interest from brands and companies and sponsors in the last few years?
Yeah, I would definitely. The momentum began a few years ago and has increased. And I would say, echoing what we've heard from a few other panelists up here today, the rise in women's sports is rising all boats.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it's bringing more eyeballs. People are appreciating the athleticism, the performance. This is sport. This is not a charity. This is investment, and we're definitely seeing an increase in sponsor interest. We're really excited about not only sponsor interest, but also investor interest and other things that you're seeing across sports more broadly. And we're approaching all those conversations with interest and curiosity about what the opportunities might be. So yes, definitely we are.
What's the pitch in those conversations? I mean, if you're talking to a company, I think someone on the CMO panel earlier mentioned, like, every brand right now is kind of thinking, well, how can we get involved? And exactly as you allude to, and I appreciate Michelle said something about this, it's not just a gesture. It can't just be like, look at us, we also put money into women's sports, right? So when you're talking to these brands or sponsors or investors, one of you just mentioned Billie Jean King. I'll say the quote again because it just really stuck in my head. She said it's changed from being millionaires to billionaires investing. What's your pitch for why the LPGA and women's golf right now, as opposed to let's put our sponsorship dollars behind any number of these other leagues that are gaining a lot of momentum?
I think one of the things that you started to allude to earlier is that we're 75 years old, but in many ways we are 75 years young. Yeah. So I think it's actually really interesting that we're sitting here together because we have been around for a while, and interest is definitely growing. But as some other people have said today, we're still underinvested. There's still opportunity there. So in terms of opportunity for growth and for it to explode, it is still there. And so I think the pitch for us, the other thing that I think I want to say is, you said hockey stick. So what some other people have said is not going to be all up and to the right. This is business. Business is bumpy. I think Betsy maybe said it's going to be clunky a little bit, but one of the things that we love about our sport is that the fan interest is growing, participation in the game is growing, women's involvement and women's participation is actually the largest segment of growth in the game today, which is fueling interest in the sport overall, including grassroots. And we've had in the last year, we've actually had the highest ratings and content consumption in the history of the tour. So it's definitely up. And I think that is going to bode well for us relative to other sports that are out there, because I think the opportunity is much greater.
Wow, saying it's underinvested in. Love that. That's just, it's a great soundbite. It's funny, you talk about participation. I've always noticed golf, and maybe you could put tennis in there, more than other sports. When executives or leaders in those sports talk about the game and the popularity, they also mention participation. Of course, obviously soccer at the youth level right now, really big. When you talk about like basketball, no one just says, and also basketball participation. In other words, you don't need to play basketball to be a big basketball fan, and yet I think golf in particular, usually, if you're a big follower of pro golf, you probably golf yourself.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. There is kind of a niche golf audience, but you talked about the creator community these days, and I think that is one of the most exciting things that's happening in golf today, is that creator economy around golf, particularly kind of YouTube golf. So I told Michelle I'm going to have to show her YouTube, because the golf is exploding, so she will love what she's seeing. But it's really making the game much more accessible to people who I think haven't traditionally played, kind of in fun, relatable ways. And I think that's also connecting to fans and pulling fans in, because they're seeing it in kind of more, not necessarily in the pro environment, but in a more relatable way for themselves, and that's actually pulling them into the game.
Yeah, Amanda, how much does sort of, not just participation in soccer, but obviously we can talk about the World Cup and global soccer, and the interest, I think, in the last decade or so has really exploded in America, the interest in international soccer, and is that a fueling factor for you guys?
Yeah, certainly. I think good to note over the next couple years here in the United States with soccer, we've certainly got the FIFA Club World Cup this summer, the World Cup next year in the United States, and of course we've got the Olympics coming, which is all of our sports, and then the Women's World Cup was just announced 2031 here in the United States, well, North America, but the Women's World Cup will be coming to the U.S. So exciting runway we have ahead of us in soccer in particular. Before I came to this job, and 4 or 5 years ago, launching the USL Super League, I was in Europe. I was the chief women's football officer at FIFPro, which is the global players union. So I worked a lot on the labor side in global soccer and global football, and really got a look at where the game is, in Europe and the Middle East and South America and Africa and kind of how the development of the game. And what I would say where we're at globally is really the professionalization of women's sport, of women's soccer in particular, is growing so much from a player-centric perspective, so making sure that the player conditions, the players feel valued in their working environments. Actually, players are being seen now in the world as workers, that it's a job that you go to, and it's not a nice to have. So on that side, they're actually employees of their company, and we're seeing the professionalization around them. And concurrently, we're seeing the investment from a business side happening, because we're seeing the ROI. It's good. Women's sports is good business if you treat it as a good business. And so the output then becomes an upwards hockey stick for everyone. So I would say the runway here is great. Around the world, it's growing and professionalizing. And we see at the USL and the Super League, our place in the global ecosystem, being aligned on the global calendar, puts us square in the middle of that conversation, not only to be part of it, but to help drive and lead what those standards, what that global game can potentially look like, and really think, what is the future of women's sports, collaborating with all of you, collaborating through GameBridge, through all the other leagues, to say, how can we all, to your point earlier, how do all of our, rising tides lift us all together?
Yeah, let's stick with the rising tide lifting all boats. I mean, I know it's a question you just get all the time, Amanda, but as you mentioned earlier, there are a couple, women's pro soccer leagues in the U.S. We heard earlier from Allie Krieger, a great NWSL star, which is the big kind of household name or closest thing to a household name right now, I think, in U.S. women's soccer. You have said, as has the NWSL, we're not competing with each other. Talk to us a little bit about sort of entering the market, though, and is that the elephant in the room for you, or what leagues, maybe it's not just soccer, do you guys look to for influence in elbowing your way in?
Yeah, no, we have a great relationship. I think there's maybe been that narrative that's existed, but actually being in so many communities. Listen, before we launched the USL Super League, there were 14 NWSL teams in a country the size of Europe, where they've got 14 leagues. So the kind of gap that existed in the women's space in the United States compared to the world was significant. But even breaking that down into the US, there's over 100 men's professional soccer teams in the United States. And at that time, there were 14 women's soccer teams, professional. So that gap was, and it still is. Now we've added 8 more, and they're adding 2 more. Like, it's not like we've even filled that gap yet to be where the men are in the United States, or the other leagues around the world. So the gap is significant, and through U.S. Soccer, we both have great relationship with U.S. Soccer, and they've been very, very supportive of our role, the NWSL's role, all of us in growing the game together. And you're actually seeing more leagues coming onto the landscape in the near future, and more women's soccer, we believe, is great, again, to lift all those boats and create more competitive sport. The more opportunities we have to play and compete at the highest level in elite environments makes our game that much better. It makes fans want to watch, it makes sponsors want to invest, and it increases the influence of the women's game overall. So other leagues we look around the world very clearly. We look to England, we look to France, we look to Spain. Japan has a women's pro league, Australia, and we learn from all of their different models. One thing about the USL in the United States, we do have two men's professional leagues. We've announced we're launching another men's professional league, and on our men's side, promotion and relegation. So we take a lot from which means that the best, of the 3 tiers, the best one from each tier gets to go up, and the least successful one in each tier goes down. So it really does reward sporting merit and performance. If you guys have seen Welcome to Wrexham or Ted Lasso.
I was just about to say, Wrexham.
Exactly. So we've enabled that on our men's side, or we will be in the next couple of years. We're building towards that, and maybe someday on the women's as well. But we have a long way to get there.
Liz, similar question. I mean, what other leagues are you looking to? Doesn't have to be women's leagues. You are the commissioner right now. It is not an easy job to be commissioner. It is often former lawyers, legal people. It's often about labor. You're often not always the most popular person, whether it comes to the players or the fans or the media. Often in big leagues, the commissioner is kind of the punching bag, right? So who do you look to, whether it's other commissioners or other leagues right now, that you feel like, okay, they have the leadership down?
Yeah, I think there's I think there's probably a natural tendency for people to think that golf would look at tennis, because we're similarly structured, because we're a global sport, we play around the world, our events are, exactly, individual players, they're independent contractors, they're not part of, a team or a league, there's not a CBA in place. And so I think there are definitely learnings from that, because they play around the globe like we do, and their events aren't necessarily connected to one another beyond the schedule aspect of it. But I think we're doing what a lot of others are. There's so much competition in sport today. There are so many new leagues coming in. And so, as I said, 75 years old, but 75 years young, and looking for ways to break through and be relevant. So watching new leagues. How are you emerging? You talked about Unrivaled earlier. The USL, others, exactly. So how are they emerging on the landscape? How are they breaking through? And how is that resonating with fans? How are fans kind of attaching to those new opportunities? But then, you also look at, the tried and true, because they still have to stay competitive. They have bigger platforms to do that, but they also have the resources to try new things. And particularly today with technology and with social platforms and other outlets, you can kind of leapfrog over some of the learnings of the past and advance your sport. So I don't think there's any one, but we're kind of watching the landscape in total to find out who's winning and how can we play in that.
Yeah, you're doing my job for me here because it's a perfect segue. I mean, you say there's more leagues than ever, there's more sports than ever. I was going to ask each of you, there's just more distractions than ever, and you only have so many hours in a day, and you can't watch everything anymore, and you can't even necessarily follow every sport at the same level. And increasingly, people are going to give their time to dramas, to Netflix and HBO instead of live sports. So for each of you guys, I mean, how do you think of making sure that we are must-see TV?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think with so many more options, though, we're learning more about consumer behaviors, and consumers are changing behaviors. So we can actually understand what they're looking for in their sporting experience in new ways, which might be more highlights, which might be more in-game opportunities. There's so many things that consumers today of women's sports are doing differently or are looking for in their sporting experience that might look differently than the past. So for us, it's really understanding what fans are looking for. Like, we know when we look at the data, we know that fans love rivalry. They love that energy, that competitiveness. They want to beat the team down the way. Our Florida teams, we have 2 teams in Florida right now, Tampa and Fort Lauderdale, and it is a grudge match every time they step on the pitch. And that's great, right? It gets great fan engagement. So how do we elevate that experience, whether it's digitally, whether it's on the broadcast, whether it's in the stadium? So that, I mean, in a safe and friendly way. But how do you elevate that storyline so that the fans feel the same that the players and the clubs do, that they really want to win Florida, right? And how do you elevate that? Is one example of an experience, but just really understand what fans are looking for and give them more of that. We try and be consumer-centric, player first, fan-centric. That's the way I want to put it.
Is that why you're adding Jacksonville? So something is happening in Florida with soccer.
Yeah, there's a lot of soccer in Florida. Yeah, Jacksonville's great. We're excited to bring them in. Yeah, I mean, but listen, there's a lot of soccer across the United States. Do you know there's 40,000 women that play college soccer today? And so when we started analyzing the numbers and looking at the opportunity for another women's professional league to launch the USL Super League, if you just look at the numbers of 40,000 women playing the college game and what opportunities exist for them, so many women after they finished their collegiate experience either quit. A very, very small number were lucky enough to get into the NWSL, but there were hundreds every year that were going abroad to play in these other leagues. As I mentioned, so many other leagues across Europe, South America, Asia. And so when we launched the Super League, the main thing I heard from players is I'm so excited to come home. So whether that meant they were coming home from abroad, being able to play in the United States again, which is where they've built their career and became, the United States is historically the best women's national team in the world, right? So coming home to where they, grew into the amazing players that they were, or in a lot of cases, they got to go back to the community that they're from. So if you're from, we have a player, Vicky Bruce, in North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina. She was playing abroad. She got to come home and now play in front of her friends and family in a community, in a city that she knows and loves. And she has a network around her. And I think that's something that we really need to consider as leaders in women's sport, is how impactful and meaningful having community as a professional athlete is.
To me? Well, I think there's a couple things. I mean, in terms of, I mentioned, we've had momentum, but we're really focused on capturing that fan interest and fan engagement, as well as interest and engagement from sponsors, which fuels the league. But just in terms of fans, I think, our kind of short list of focal points, because not knowing how long I would have in this interim role, try to really get laser focused with the team. And so there's kind of a short list for me, which is great golf. Not a lot I can do about that, but the good news is the players are doing it for me. The performance in between the ropes has just never been stronger. I mean, we've had some really dominant performances. We've had really dramatic moments. I don't know how many of you watched the Chevron Championship, but a 5-way playoff for the first major of the season, which is the largest major championship playoff in our history. It was also the highest rated tournament that we've had in, I think, the history of the LPGA, which was incredible. So great golf is happening out there. Speed of the game. Pace of play, because we're an entertainment property also. And so we want it to be enjoyable for everyone, and not just the fans, but also the players. And that's why player-led initiative, really kind of fueled that for us, but making the game more engaging to the consumer. We've heard it all day long, storytelling. You know, people don't follow the tour, they follow our players. And so focusing on creating content and getting that out to our fans and giving fans ways to connect and understand and know those personalities has really been important to us. And I think it really has been driving the most fan engagement for us, creating content and stories around our players. Sponsors. Obviously, really important. Thank you to Mizuho, announced earlier. For those not in the room, they just extended their sponsorship with us for 5 more years. We'll be in the market, so great to know we're going to be here for a while. And look, we're going to continue to push purse growth, but also really the quality experience of the players. We heard that from some of the athletes on stage. We know that's important, and getting that on par with men's sports, we think is really important. Because these are the best players in the world. And last, really just kind of around fans, we are focused both on in-venue experiences. Our venue experiences appeal to a variety of groups. Business clients and the ability to engage and develop those relationships like we heard earlier, but also families. We find the women's game has so much appeal for families, particularly families with young kids, because the game is relatable. Our players are accessible, and you can interact with them. So it's really a great experience when you're there. You're outside the ropes, but they will engage with you, which is just a tremendous value and for a professional sports experience. But we're also pushing broadcast. We're pushing broadcast times and working with our broadcast partners so that they make this important, because people watch what they feel is important. And so doing a lot around that space as well.
Not every day you get to hear a current commissioner's to-do list in her time as commissioner. Really cool. I think that's all the time we have, but Liz and Amanda, really, really great stuff. Great to close on that. A round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Just great stuff.